The opinions expressed on the following audio program are solely those of the host and the guests. Burner Podcast is an independently produced, not-for-profit show and is not associated with the Burning Man organization or its subsidiaries. The views expressed are not representative of the entire Burning Man community and are presented here for entertainment purposes only. In short, calm the fuck down. It's just a podcast.
All right, it's episode number 142, and it is 102 days till the man burns as of this recording, and it's probably 111 degrees outside. I am in Austin, Texas, where I've been for the past month, and every day, I got to tell you, the whole time that I'm out here, my mind keeps going back to how it makes such complete, perfect sense that Austin is the home of the world's first regional. There's something about the vibe of Texas when I'm out here, and it's not just the heat. It's also just something about the element of rascality that I like referencing Alan Watts on when I come out here. There's this playfulness in Texan culture, this rebelliousness, and then add to that this sense that we are hiding, in this the little bubble of burner world when I come and connect here with people. So yeah, every time I'm out here, this is where my mind goes. I'm like, yep, it makes sense. It makes complete sense. And then add to that all the really cool signs and stuff that they have out here. So anyway, Austin is a super cool place. I'm super happy to be here. And when I am out here, I have my own official producer for Burner Podcast, and that is Kim Loop, who has set up every episode that I've recorded out here, which has actually been one. But on this round, it looks like we're going to probably do 2 or 3. And so we were ideating on what we could do today, or do this round that I'm in Austin, what episodes we could do. And she was pitching out a few different topics and a few different interview subjects. And an excellent one that popped up, which is so perfectly in alignment with exactly what I'm exploring and a chapter of art, conversation, and philosophy that I'm in right now. And it was a photographer, Mike Whitten, who has recently officially kind of settled down into Austin and recently photographed Freezerburn, which is one of the Austin regional events. Mike also has experience shooting at the Big Burn, as they call it out here in Texas, which is Burning Man, which in Southern California we generally refer to as that thing out in the desert. He has had experience with photography for many, many years, since college. This is decades of experience as a photographer, and then shooting at Burning Man. He's been at Burning Man for a decade as well, and then coming out into Texas. And the thing about Austin's photography culture is that it is a lot more specific, shall we say, and they are very, very careful about what sorts of imagery get out into the world. So the consent culture around photography in Texas is nothing to mess with. It's definitely something that they are a lot more serious and intentional about. And that is what makes Mike exactly the perfect person for me to connect with on this chapter. When I was at YOUtopia, which is San Diego's regional burn, we did the very first iteration of a topic that I'm exploring, a conversation called Candids and Consent. And it's about developing and exploring what an ethical framework might look like for photography in public spaces and in events, and how we can be better. We can be better photographers, how we can communicate with each other better between photographers and participants, how we can generally take the experiences that we're having here in burner culture and export them out into the default world so that we can do better in general with civic responsibility, with radical inclusion, with all the ways that we can implement the principles. So Mike is absolutely the perfect person I've been dying to talk to, and he's amazing. And we have this really great conversation where we get to know where Mike comes from. We get some of his life story and how he ends up, of course, at his first burn. And then we geek out for about an hour about what an ethical framework of photography could look like. The lessons that we can all learn from Texas consent culture, the experiences that we've had with shooting at the Big Burn. I'm even saying it now that I've been out here long enough. And there's a lot of lessons, just a really, really great conversation on all of this. And just really excited to share this with you. It was an amazing episode, and I think it makes complete sense to be able to just tell you that today's episode is entitled Candids and Consent. I go by Mr. Arash, even though nobody calls me Mr. Welcome to Burner Podcast.
On the first part of the journey, I was looking at all the life. There were plants and birds and rocks and things. There was sand and hills and rain. The first thing I met was a fly with a buzz and the sky with no clouds. The heat was hot and the ground was dry, but the air was full of sound. I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no name.
Doesn't whine too much. I will warn you that earlier this morning, for no reason that I could discern, every smoke detector in the house started screaming. Okay. I went through the whole house. I see no blinky lights. There was no fire, but they were all going off.
That's a really funny thing to be concerned about. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So it may happen. It's okay.
It may happen.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those, I don't know what caused it, and I'm certain I didn't do anything to fix it.
It might be a hilarious commercial break if that happens.
There you go, right?
So what we do is like in the final show, there's like the pre-podcast like warning dialogue. Yeah. And then I do the intro, and then there's the intro music, and then it gets into the interview portion. So I'm going to do this intro part, and I'm going to kind of wing it.
Okay. Well, so yesterday I had not listened to any of your podcasts, but that was yesterday.
Excellent.
You know, I've been a speaker at conferences and classes for too long not to try to be prepared. So, of course, I listened to a podcast last night, right? So
there is a perfect, like, fine moment of, like, too much preparation and not enough preparation. And I'm just like trying to constantly guide whatever that middle area is.
I read a couple blog posts, and that's where I think you said you started out either doing video or video and photo. And I could have sworn I read the words, I wanted out of the drudgery of post-production.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. That is correct.
And I was going to ask you about that from a personal point of view, because I've done a couple of videos from trips. I'm always looking for a good balance of still and video, and I haven't found it because it seems like video editing is just so much work.
I can't stand it. Well, here's the messed up part of it is like I'm really good at it. And so what I've learned, and this has been from over a decade of interviewing artists and people in various levels of creative work, and even industry, entrepreneurs, everything. And this lesson took 15 years to finally download and accept. Just because you're good at something, it doesn't mean you should do it.
You should do it, yeah.
And with video, I started out with zero budget music videos, so I learned kind of filmmaking on my own. And I am, and just, pardon the brag, I am like fucking excellent at it.
Right.
Like I am very good at it. But a lot of times I get into like editing work. Simply because we don't have another editor that I can work with, or what I don't like about editors that I end up working with is that they are not as merciless as I want them to be. And I want them to just go nuts and kill the babies, like they say. And
shoot your children, right?
Yeah,
that's the worst part about photo editing.
So. I have no problem with that. I love doing that.
Right.
Yeah, but even with photography, like the part of the job that I hate is the culling process.
Yeah.
Going through, and because I'm like, I love the photography,
Sure.
But then going through files afterwards drives me nuts.
Yeah, I've gotten to where I don't mind that so much. And what I've ended up doing There was a old photography podcast called The Radiant Vista. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
Sounds amazing.
So there were two guys together making it. One of them tended to talk the philosophical side the most, and the other one tended to talk the technical side the most.
Right.
And I remember Craig Tanner was the one doing the philosophical side, and I remember listening to him, and he said, when you're editing, you're always taught to find, these are the reasons you can get rid of photos, right? Reasons to cut and cull them. He's like, but also look for reasons to keep them.
Right.
If it's technically, maybe not great, but it captured a great moment, keep it. Look for reasons to keep them as well as looking for reasons to get rid of them. And so I don't know, somehow that helped, right? Because I don't mind going through my photos and saying, these are the ones I'm going to keep, and I'll store them and I'll work on those. And then later, I'll need a boost of energy. Maybe I'll go back to burn photos and look for others. And it's like, man, why didn't I keep that one? Edit it up and post it somewhere and share it, right?
That's so spot on. That's so exactly. Yeah, I needed to hear that. And just that's so, I really appreciate that the two hosts focused on sort of like these different parts of it.
Right.
Because this is such a common part of the creative process. Like you see it a lot with like DJ producer duos. Like one of them is the more extroverted, big showman type, right? And then like the other one's like the more like nerdy, sitting behind the computer, playing with a synth for multiple hours until they figure it out.
Yep.
And you kind of need those two sides of the experience. But as a photographer, you kind of have to figure out how to be both of those at the same time.
Right. Right. And hopefully, at least when I'm shooting, when I'm editing, I don't care if I have to stop and learn tech, but when I'm shooting, I want to have that down so cold that I don't have to think about it, right? It's just got to be out of my way.
Yeah.
Right. So I can focus on the people in the moment and, everything else I'm doing. And hopefully with enough custom settings on the camera that I know where they go to, I've taken the time to work all those out ahead of time. So in the moment, I don't have to deal with any of that.
Yeah.
Right. As much as possible.
That's actually, it's so funny because so editing, I have not found too many other photographers discussing this the way that in this topic that I'm about to explore. I really do feel that editing got lumped in with what a photographer is supposed to do, but I feel it is a completely different part of the experience. I think it's like the way a musician can, play the guitar and sing a song and play drums, but I don't think they're the same instrument. And I think perhaps part of that comes from having worked in marketing for as long as I have. And I've personally had the experience of photos being edited differently for different projects, for different marketing projects. Because you can take the photo and then, then there's the basic editing part, like you want to get the focus right and, yada, yada. But then you can do wildly different things to it afterwards for wildly different projects.
Right.
The exact same photo can be desaturated for a somber storytelling approach,
right?
Or it could be hyper saturated for a tourism photo. They can be very different stories,
depending on the edit.
Yeah,
that's interesting. I see see online challenges. Somebody will post a photo and say, "Edit my photo," and I'll pick the winner, right?
Yeah.
And kind of feels like they're crowdsourcing other people's brains to get ideas, and good on them. Good on them for that. I wonder. So do you ever shoot a photo knowing I'm pulling the trigger and this won't be complete until the edit's complete? Right? Do you ever have that thought while you're shooting? I
used to, and in fact, that was the way that we were taught in art school.
Okay.
To one of the things was we were taught always shoot raw. Get as much information as possible so that you can edit that later.
Right.
And my experience has been going the opposite direction in my career. And I want to spend as little time behind the computer as possible. And I want to capture the energy, not even necessarily document accurately what is happening. I want to capture the energy, the inexplicable, the unnameable thing that we are experiencing in that moment.
Sure.
And I would love to not deal with it afterwards.
Right. Well, you can fix, with cameras today being so good, you can fix some of the technical stuff that you used to not be able to fix. I remember shooting slide film, right? And you got your latitude right or you didn't, and that was that. End of
Yeah.
story, right? But you have so much more flexibility to fix that now. But what you're just talking about, the energy. So your photos resonated with me when I looked through your portfolio.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Same as
because
yours.
well, I could see you called it energy, right? And if you ask me to summarize, it's like, what do you shoot? It's like I try to shoot life, right? I try to shoot things with life.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's positive energy, and sometimes it isn't, for sure. But maybe those are our two different words for the same thing,
I think they
right?
are.
Because that was what resonated with me was I don't know, man. I've got a burn picture floating around somewhere. There was some girl on a swinging real high. I did the typical, look, point at the camera, because it wasn't, I couldn't go ask, right? So look, point at the camera, nod, start shooting, and there's one where she was, that thing in a swing where you're up high and you just throw your head back and you look at the ground behind you, right? And I managed to catch one, in focus and with that thrown back, and you could just tell she was just gone in the moment, and life was awesome, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it came through, right? And it came through, and I see that in your photos. I saw that when I looked through your portfolio, and that was what I was saying, where it really resonated with me. I mean, other than the obvious skill and setup and whatnot, it's that getting that, this is what I'm seeing and feeling that person feel right now, and I got it, right?
Yeah.
So
I
that's
super
what feels
appreciate
good.
that, and I see the same in your work. And I
Good.
knew, well, that's the thing. I've had multiple other photographers on this podcast. Trey Ratcliffe immediately pops into my mind. He was recent. Terry Pratt, founder of Profiles in Dust, and he's a 2-time Emmy award-winning cinematographer and photographer. So I just even on the drive over here to connect with you, I was really kind of like reflecting in my mind about how eager I am to have the conversation with you that we are having right now, because I do feel like we have a strong alignment on those philosophical sort of explorations. And I am, my intention for this podcast is to further massage and kind of formulate some of these ethical frameworks that I've been working on for the past however many years I've been doing this. So that's why I'm I see that you see the same kind of things that I do. And I could see that this episode was going to be more like the two of us geeking out like crazy, more so than me just like asking you questions,
Right. Well, so I'm going to say thanks. Okay. And one of the hardest things I had to learn at Burning Man, or one of the life lessons I took out of it, is sometimes when somebody walks up and gives you a gift, it's okay to just say thank you and stop. Right? Because that's where the imposter syndrome is like, come on, man, you can't, I'm not in the same league you guys are, but maybe sometimes I know I get a good shot, right? Maybe some of them are, so thanks. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
But
we've talked about that a lot on this podcast. Burning Man has taught a lot of folks receiving gifts is harder than giving gifts.
Much. It is so hard not to turn somebody giving you a gift into a transaction, right? And I still see it. I see it even in veterans. Oh, here, let me give you this. Oh, let me go grab my list to give you back, right?
Yeah.
You don't. I mean, it's okay if you want to, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
And sometimes the best thing you can do is just say thanks.
Yeah.
And I struggle. I think I will always struggle with that from time to time. But anyway,
It has been conveyed to me that struggle may actually be what contributes to us continuing on this journey towards mastery. Because if we were ever satisfied, we would stop growing.
Yeah. I've said to friends, I believe I will die learning how to live, right? And that doesn't mean I don't know how to live well now, but I think I can get better. I can get better today or tomorrow or the next day, right? So, I mean, it's okay to say, hey, I'm good, or hey, I've got some things down, or I've learned some lessons, and God knows I've still got so many to learn. So,
yeah,
that's okay to have both be true at once.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would say, yes, as soon as we figure out one thing, the next thing is the thing we're learning, which is, by the way, like Burning Man. As soon as I figure out a thing, it's next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to jump back I had this question in my head that I wanted to ask you, and it's entirely possible that you'll hear the question and go, or it'll resonate. I want to go back to, in your mind, to your earliest burn experience.
Sure.
What year was it?
2013, cargo cult.
Okay. So 2013, and the big burn, it was your first Burning Man experience?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. I only went to regional for the first time in February.
Okay.
So, yep.
Excellent. So you're out there, and I want to know if you have a memory of a moment that felt like this like transcendental, beautiful experience, and it was one where you didn't have your camera with you, and you equal parts felt like, I wish I had my camera with me, but I'm also super glad that I don't have a camera and I'm completely immersed in this thing right now.
Yeah, let me see if anything pops to mind. You know, the one thing that pops to mind, was there ever a moment at that burn where I didn't have my camera with me? Yeah. So there were certainly transcendental moments where there was no photography involved. Can I remember thinking I'm glad? I cannot honestly remember thinking I'm glad I don't have my camera with me. If I was that lost in it, it was just gone.
Yeah. Tell me the first one that pops in your mind.
Sure. So there's a little bit of backstory that goes along with that, right?
Yeah.
First burn, I ended up going to the first burn with a man that I was acquainted with, and a man that I met the night, 1 or 2 nights before we drove into the playa, right?
Wow. And
I remember I'd gotten out there, so it doesn't matter the night count, but so the man that I knew partially at the time's name is Ernie Wu. Second character in the story is Mark Newquist. Ernie I knew through work, and Mark I had not met. Ernie and Mark were friends ahead of time. And I can remember laying in bed in Ernie's apartment the night before Mark got there. And, you know, my world is predictable as heck. In the morning, I can conquer anything. It's dewy and fresh. Arr. In the evening, when the energy sags, it's like, what have I done? Oh, my God. How did I get in this situation, right? So the evening before Mark showed up, I remember laying in the guest room in Ernie's condo on a single bed, looking at the single bed Mark was going to be sleeping on the next night, thinking, the hell have I done? I'm about to be sharing a bedroom with some dude I've never met, right? So that was, this year, that was 10 years ago, 10th anniversary. And during that burn, I made 2 lifelong friends. Mark called me yesterday, right? And we, I think after that Mark's never been back. This was the first year I'll have gone that Ernie isn't my camping partner. I don't think Mark and I didn't see each other face to face for 7 years after the burn. Wow. But I don't think there was a month we didn't talk in that time, right? So I made 2 lifelong friends that first burn. And so the transcendental moments, it was the conversations we had, right? 2013, no cell service. There's getting to be more and more, right? Yeah. But at 2013, we had none. And the good old days. We were tourists first year, right? We took things to gift and tried to engage, but essentially tourists, not trying to help build a theme camp, rented an RV, went to Burning Man, right?
What gift did you bring? What gifts did you bring to give out?
Oh boy. That year we made little wooden squares, laser etched a QR code on one side of them. And I forget the name of the record, but the record that went out with the Voyager spacecraft that Sagan helped make, right? Etched that on part of because it was cargo cult, aliens, big spaceship, right? So we tried to play into the theme. And the gift that year was that on one side to reflect the theme, a QR code on the other side, and a bag full of seeds, milkweed seeds. And the idea was give them to people to take home and plant to help encourage habitat for monarch butterflies. Right?
Beautiful.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun because it turns out they're we did get questions about non-indigenous and invasive species. And there's some milkweed species that are already all over the United States, right? Yeah. So everywhere you go, they're there. So it wasn't a problem. But that was, our gifts have always had a reason to have a conversation with somebody hooked in, right?
Yeah. That's what they're supposed to be.
Yeah, right. But Mark and Ernie and I would, in the afternoon when it was hot, we just kind of got in this routine of meet at the RV, have lunch, and sit and talk. And we would have 2 or 3 hour conversations every afternoon. And the key was with no interruptions. nobody's cell phone rang. Nobody knocked on the door, right? And it probably helped that Burning Man, everyone's intense. Your first one, maybe, an extra order of intense, right?
Sure.
But I truly believe lifelong friendships were forged in those afternoon conversations. And I don't know if I knew it at the time, but looking back at it, we would just get lost in talking, right? And it was very round robin. So that's there were some other good moments from that burn, but I think that's clearly the most lifelong impactful ones. Right?
How did you meet them?
Ernie was Ernie at the time was the CEO of the company that I worked for, and
where were you then? What city was this? Where were you?
Well, the company was headquartered in Huntsville, Alabama. Okay. I was working for them down in Houston. I had just hired on for them working software down at Johnson Space Center, right? So, but I hired on as a manager or team lead actually to bring in. I needed to build up an organization of 24 software engineers, and I still believe, and even got more into it since then, in thinking style assessments can be very helpful in matching people effectively to other people. Unethical to use them as a hiring tool, highly ethical to use them to improve the effectiveness of teamwork, right?
Thinking assessments?
Think how the different ways we approach the world. Myers-Briggs is the most common one out there that people have heard of, right? INTJ, INFP, all of that stuff, right? The different ways, there are assessments out there that can give you a notion of how somebody approaches the world and problem solving. And there are complementary approaches and there are identical approaches. And so I was using a tool.
I'm sorry, before may I,
sure.
Just so I understand, it's like you're saying they are helpful in order to, it almost like sounds like you're saying it's helpful to utilize them as tools to grow closer to people, but not use them as a way to filter people out.
That is correct. I love that. The data shows, and I absolutely believe that.
I love that.
It's just to try to understand how somebody thinks and say, therefore, you can't do this job. It's just wrong.
Yeah.
They're going to do it differently, right? Easy example, and I have the data to back it up. Go figure, the people at NASA that do the software that gets spaceships safely to space are extremely structured and analytic individuals, right? Go figure, okay? Did the job make them that way, or did they get into the job because they were that way? That's how they approach the world? Doesn't matter. It's a fact. It's there, right? There are other folks that are typically intuitive and, crazy ideas pop out all the time, right?
Yeah.
So can they both do the job? Absolutely. Are they going to do it very differently? Absolutely, right? It's okay. I will never limit somebody based on that. I can and have taught classes where I say to people, you can go do this. It may be tiring, may take more energy. You can absolutely do it. Right.
I love this approach so much, and I'm in my head is like spinning with all the ways that I can implement this to map this to other parts of the experience. One example that pops into my head as a animal lover, as a person with lots of animals in your life, one example that pops into my head immediately is, I guess, like the difference between people who would say, no, you should never be near a pit bull because they're, pit bulls, versus let's love this animal, and then learning about their breed can help us better understand some of their behavior and movement.
Sure. Right. So we were talking before the podcast about the rescues, and, Dreyfus, one of our cats, just jumped up between us here on the couch.
I love it.
So my wife and I both rescue, and we both love rescues, and we've, it's not always worked to our benefit, but neither of us have ever told the other one, no, you can't rescue that animal. I can't conceive of us saying that.
Yeah.
Right? But if you look at these thinking styles assessment, on every axis that one can measure, she and I are as opposite as it is possible for the instrument to score. Okay. And she'll hear this podcast and laugh because she knows it's true, and we laugh about it. And, some situations were perfectly complementary. We got all the bases covered. Sometimes it makes communications harder, right? Yeah. Things can break down. But so we both rescue animals, just come at how we do it. differently, right? So
I love this. Okay. All right.
Okay.
So I'm sorry. Please continue.
So I'm lost. Where were we? Oh, transcendental,
Yeah.
how to meet Ernie.
Yeah.
So I hired on out there and started applying this instrument to all the new hires because nobody told me I couldn't, and I didn't ask. Right? I just started doing it, and it kind of got back to headquarters, and he already had a bias in that direction. So so that resulted in, I mean, Ernie's CEO of the company. I'm just some 6-week-old new hire that just came on board, and we ended up talking. And somehow, at some point, that turned into a conversation about Burning Man. And man, I've started, my tech career started December 1984, right? So, I retired last summer. I did it for a long time. And so I was around when Usenet got popular, and there was a guy named Brad Templeton that used to run a really popular news group called rec.humor.funny, and he also went to Burning Man as a photographer and took photos. So I probably first heard of Burning Man in the mid-'80s, late 80s, I don't know. But coming from my background, rural Mississippi, Alabama, the notion of actually going to this crazy place, I just couldn't see how, right?
Yeah.
It didn't ever occur to me that I could actually do that, right?
Yeah. Did you have like your community of weirdos in Alabama?
Not so much. Okay. I worked, only in that if you work in computer science, you're going to work with you're kind of going to work with some not mainstream people.
Out of the box thinkers, yeah.
Right, yeah. It's just, you can't work with people that think about the world a little differently, you're in the wrong career.
Makes sense.
So
that makes complete sense.
Yeah. So anyway, not so much, but anyway, so Ernie and I ended up talking. Burning Man came up, and he's like, "Hey, you want to go?" I'm like, "Hell yes!" So probably 20 years after hearing about it, I finally made it out there. And so
that's amazing. Yeah. I mean, that answers a lot of the questions I normally ask on the, on the profiling.
Okay.
Yeah. So Ernie gets a whiff of your non-traditional thinking, which he's got a bias in a different direction.
Yep.
And what leads to the two of you going, all right, we're going to Burning Man together as CEO and me?
I don't think either of us can remember the exact conversation. I'm sure I can't, and I know we've talked about it. He had been to half a burn.
Okay.
He had gone into Burning Man. His kids were in school in Reno at a school for very gifted children. And he had gone in, but the company that he ran at the time contracted with NASA a lot, and a hurricane hit Stennis Space Center. And the company was, and Ernie is, incredibly human-oriented. And as soon as he heard that a bunch of his people had been hit by a hurricane, he left. So he came into the burn and I think left on Wednesday or something. So that's why that's when I say he'd been to half a burn. So he hadn't completed it. And somewhere in there, he mentioned it and said yes. And I'm like, yeah, sounds like a great idea. So I want to go see this thing.
Amazing.
So, yeah. But it was really easy. It was been really nice having a friend based out of Reno going to burn, right?
So, were you shooting at this time? How long have you been photographing?
Sure, yeah. And I bought my first film camera was a Canon AE1 that I bought in college while I was still an undergrad in college.
Nice.
So I have shot for a while, right? Film and slides back in the day, and then there was a period of time in there, but always a computer head, right? I mean that's how I make my living, and I love it. Not just it was easy for me to do because I love tech and learning about new things. So there was a period of time film scanners were popular. You could buy fairly decent 35 millimeter film scanners, and so I'd moved in that direction. But I shot enough film that I bought it in bulk from B&H and kept it in my freezer, right? So, and then would, scan it and edit it and play with it and print it just for the love of it. I really wasn't doing anything, anything with it. But yeah, so it goes back a ways. And then bought some of the very first digital cameras, 640 by 480 resolution, and then returned them. They just weren't there, right? Yeah. But then some of the, D30 Canon's first 3 or 4 megapixel digital, it was enough, It was enough to make good photos with.
Yeah.
And I saw that coming and sold all my film cameras, sold all my film in bulk. And then as soon as I could, picked up one of the first ones and went digital ever since.
Yeah. I years ago, I interviewed a photographer by the name of Esteban Orial, who's, he's sort of the person that you could trace back, if any viewers have a frame of reference for this listeners, this frame of reference is black and white, sort of like gritty urban LA aesthetic.
Sure.
He was a security guard on tour with the hip hop group Cypress Hill. And his dad, who was a photographer, said, you should take some pictures because this is interesting.
Yeah.
And he started, and then the imagery that he was producing, this gritty black and white, kind of like street urban energy vibe to it, very kind of almost a tribal energy to it, now has been copied the world over. But he was sort of the originator. But cool. The way he described it to me, we asked about, do you prefer digital or film? And he said, well, there are still situations where I shoot digital, but film is the preference because it forces you, it like puts you in this constraint and you have no choice but to get into that mode. And the example that he shared was when he was shooting the poster for, it's a movie with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino called Righteous Kill, which did not do very well, but the poster is great. And he had this like old film camera, which made like a loud, like sound when he hits the shutter. And he said he had like maybe 10 minutes with De Niro and Pacino, and they were originally just going to use this photo for like a skateboard. But he comes in and he makes that sound, and Pacino's like, oh, I like that. Oh. and then they start like posing, and then they get this image out of it, which apparently the marketing agency for the film had like already done this entire campaign. And when they saw his photos, they tossed it all out.
Oh, that's so cool.
And used his. And so to this day, I remember that story in my head. And I think even when I'm shooting digital, I pretend like it's film. Because for one thing, I don't want to dig through it afterwards. I'm really lazy.
Yeah.
But I want to know, sort of like, especially as a person who's come through the film world and going into this, how do you approach that process? What is in your thinking when you're shooting?
Yeah. So I'm a blend, right? In that I absolutely believe that the freedom to pull the trigger, look at what you got, edit, delete, and throw away. I have spent so many hours editing photos and then just delete them, right? Yeah. Delete the edit, delete the photo. Is learning the craft of photo, but pardon me for saying this, but I had to learn the lesson. If you work real hard polishing the turd, it's still a turd.
I so agree.
That made it. That's part of why maybe I don't mind culling so much, because a lot of images I can look at and it's I could soak so many hours into you, and I just missed. I just missed. So you're gone. So I think it makes that easier, right?
Yeah.
Because I would, shooting film, you only got so many exposures, and you wanted to try to make them all good, and they just aren't, But on the flip side, I've done some other things with my wife owning the vet business. We had a little pet photography studio in the clinic, right? And we would shoot together, very much teamwork. She's an amazing animal handler, and I would do the photography, and after a while we were just such a great team at it. And so on the other times, sometimes I knew when I had the shot. I know when I have the shot, right? Yeah. That one we're trying to work to get. And you're constantly watching it. We've done photos with 5 or 6 dogs in them, and a cat and a person at the time, and getting all the right expressions right is, oof.
Yeah.
Sometimes we've worked at it for 40 minutes, right? And I'll pull the trigger and I know I got the shot. Once in a blue moon, we'd set all that up, pop, got it, move on. So no point in stressing the dogs, making them hot and tired. No point in putting her and me through anymore. I got it. I don't need to look at it. I know when I shot it that I've got it. So So sometimes, some situations are moving so fast you don't know if you've got it or not, so you just keep shooting. But sometimes you just know. At least I do, and then I move on. Quit pulling the trigger, because then I got to go edit all the freaking photos.
Right. I do that. I also do that a lot because I'm paying a lot of attention to the energy of my subject, whether it's a human or an animal or it's living entity. And I try to do my best to kind of feel with my intuition where this entity is at with their patience.
Yep.
On this image.
Yep.
And even though as a image maker, I can see this cool light in this background and go, I could keep shooting this for hours, but the person, that moment might have passed.
Right. Yep. Happens with people. Absolutely happens with pets. Right. We got to be pretty successful at it. But every now and then I would know I didn't have the shot. I'm not going to get the shot. And you could see that, the dog's tongue starting to hang out. They're just over it. Yeah. And we just had to say, you know what, we got to quit, because we're just torturing these animals to no point. Yeah. We'll give you the best we got. I'm so sorry. And you're just done. You just got to accept it.
For me, I've also so spirituality, and I maybe you'll appreciate the way that I'm describing this. It is a framework. It's not necessarily that I'm saying that this view of spirit is the accurate one. It's just a visual interface that I can apply to physical reality to help me navigate it and make decisions. So a lot of that is when I would return to, if in my head, in my brain, I'm going back to thinking, oh no, I could have done this better. Oh no, I should push harder. I should blah, blah, blah. I go back to sort of where my heart space is and where my spiritual ideation is. And it goes, you know what? The universe meant for it to be this thing, and let it go.
Sure.
Appreciate this moment and then let it go and move on to the next thing.
Yep. Do the best you can with what you've got where you are. And once you know you've done that, no point in looking back and generating regrets later, right?
I like that, generating regrets.
Right. Exactly. I didn't have any in the moment. I'd done my best on the spot then. Why now? Why go back and beat myself up now? Right.
Earlier, when you were describing the gal on the swing, and you pantomimed in a way that the listeners couldn't see, that you pointed at your camera in order to, you basically had a very quick consent conversation with her. It was like a brief moment. She's on the swing. She sees you with the camera. You pointed the camera and you do the, is this okay?
Yep.
And she gave the nod of approval.
Yep.
And then you shot. And I want to know what your earliest memory is of having an exchange like that. Doesn't have to be at Burning Man.
Oh no, it was definitely college. And it's funny. It's a funny thing. It's a partial memory. I got called. I went along on a shoot for some girls that were going to be in the college yearbook at a location. And honest to God, I don't remember how I got invited or why. I really don't. But the memory sticks out, right? Because there was definitely, I don't know if you've ever been the second shooter or the uninvited shooter somewhere. So you want to get some photos, but you're going to stay out of that person's way because the last thing you want to do is interfere, right? So I was that. Yeah. And it was the, point at my camera that, okay, point and, yep, right. And it sticks out because for one particular set, the main shoot, I don't know if they lost the film, if it didn't work out, something was wrong, who knows? But they ended up using the shots that I made out of this one particular place because they ended up with none from the official shooter. So I think that kind of, it's like, hey, I got a photo in the yearbook, right? Yeah. So I think that's kind of what anchored that memory. But yeah, that's easy because that was, girls standing on a staircase posed in evening gowns for something, and it was exactly that.
Yeah.
It's
pointing
okay.
At the camera,
kind of sheepish look, pointing at your cameras, so yeah, easy.
And the reason that exchange is interesting is that, so of course I did the first variation of this talk at YOUtopia, San Diego's regional, which is probably going to be the title of this episode, Candids and Consent.
Yeah.
And I've done a lot of photography in events and stuff, and it was about I'm in the process of developing an ethical framework that we can help to help other photographers outside of the burner community be able to navigate in order to have a higher system of ethics on how they photograph at events and stuff. And so, yeah, I've gone through the experience of shooting at like political events. In those situations, overwhelmingly, a lot of these politicians, like they're dying to be seen. Like they immediately make friends with the photographer. Like they want to be photographed, right?
Right.
But I've also had the experience of knowing when some public servant is not keen to be in an image with somebody who is at this event. So I've learned how to navigate that a little bit, right?
Okay.
Got to pay attention to that.
Sure.
Because that can get politically sensitive. But then like through that process, I think that's where I developed my intuition on the process, on this subject. And then coming into the burn community and really diving into like consent culture.
Sure. Yeah.
You know? And this whole experience of like pointing at the camera, asking if it's okay, it's not standard. It's not anywhere near standard yet. In fact, I would say a lot of event photographers that I've observed out in the wild, they're definitely not doing that.
Yeah.
And I've had definitely clients who ask like what the legal ramifications are about blah, blah, blah. And usually my response is, we could try being like human.
Right.
And having some, before we get into the legal stuff, like that's, if you've gotten into the legal side of it, you've already failed on a human level.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm curious sort of where this journey began for you, because in my observation, it is not something that exists in a lot of the default world. And I think that in the burn community, we are in a unique place to develop this framework and export it.
Sure. Yeah. So first, I ran out of time to Google and try to find that talk online last night. So before we leave, I want to link.
Oh yeah, it wasn't recorded.
I want to go hear
not
that.
yet. It wasn't recorded yet.
Oh, was it recorded?
No,
too
no.
bad.
No.
Okay.
My vision of it is that I'm going to have a few more talks like this with folks like you,
All right.
and keep fine tuning this.
Okay.
And it will eventually be available.
Okay. All right. Well, whenever you do, I'm highly interested in that because it's definitely been a journey.
Yeah. You're helping me co-create it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's an anyway. So, up to that first burn in 2013, the only events that I'd gone to where there wasn't any sense of being an uninvited photographer, right? Or that I would be taking pictures of somebody that didn't want to. Social events, little league games, shooting pictures with the intent to give them to parents, whatever, clear intent and clear, nobody, if you're showing up with a good camera at some little league ball game and saying, hey, I'm going to take pictures of the kids and give them to you, you're highly welcome, at least at the time that I was doing it. I don't know if it's changed out there, right?
I'm going to interject a few times in order to clarify parts of this.
Sure.
And I hope, apologies for interrupting you. So one of the things that I have learned through my experiences in the burn community is that due to having stronger, more vibrant consent conversations, part of what we are also exploring is that we may be at an event or a happening where 95% of the people are okay with it.
Yeah.
And then 5%, maybe one or two random people aren't. And what is that old saying about like we can really measure a society by how we treat our least fortunate? So in a situation like that, what I'm looking at is instead of looking at those two people who aren't comfortable with it and saying, fuck those guys, I'm looking at them and going like, how can we develop an ethical framework where they can also feel seen even if they are only two people?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's so many different reasons why. And I've certainly had experiences where I feel like somebody's honestly just being like a dick, but I've had other experiences where I'm like, oh no, it makes complete sense that this person is not comfortable and is not giving the thumbs up. And
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm curious how we navigate all that.
So the answer is I was looking for your talk to help inform my own thinking on the subject. Okay. I mean, to be clear, it's not like I have any answers, but part of why we're talking here is the one regional that I've been to was Freezerburn this past February. And the Freezerburn's been around quite a while, right? Yeah. And they have a set of ethics. And, at the big burn, I mean, in theory, you're supposed to get, written on paper. You're supposed to get consent from everybody. But in practice, the community has evolved different standards, right? And, I sent you links to a couple of photos that, one of the things I enjoy is taking photos, posting them to the Burning Man Facebook group, and just seeing where the conversation goes. Almost every time the photos find their way back to the people that were in them, even if they look unidentifiable to me, right?
Fascinating.
And in every case but one, that's been extremely well received. Oh my God, both of those photos that I sent you, one of two, a bunch of people watching the sunset, but two people in the foreground with their back turned. I mean, I know them now. I met them face to face at the last burn. They ended up accidentally being in the foreground of two of my photos, 2 burns apart.
No way.
Seriously, dude. I get goosebumps. I just got look at that. I just got goosebumps.
I
again.
Can tell you, listeners, I am looking at his goosebumps right now.
There's 80,000 people. How did I get the same 2 people in the foreground of 2 photos 2 years apart when I had no clue, 1, that I had done it, 2, who they were when I did it, right?
Insane.
It is insane. But, and I was going to try to meet him at the last burn. Hadn't managed to make it work out. One of them, Amy Wick, does rope art. I have some of it here. Went to my favorite event at the Big Burn, the Billion Bunny March. I'm a proud bunny. And, at one point we were stopping for a speech, and I'm just looking around the crowd, and I look down, and there's a piece of rope art hanging on somebody's belt. And it's like, Amy? And she turns around, Mike? Right? So 3 times I have found them at the Big Burn for no apparent reason.
Insane.
And that is a whole nother conversation about why things like that happen.
Yeah.
Right.
I've been trying to figure that out for 142 episodes.
So anyway, and the other photo ended up finding its way back. There's a man with his back turned going into the temple. And I knew his story. I'd spoken to him twice that day. Once in the very, very morning, and it was the first day of the burn, and once in the dark evening when I shot that photo. I spoke to him in the morning. I spoke to him right before I took the photo, but he didn't know he was in it as he was walking off. Had his back turned, which meets my standards photography at the Big Burn, not at Freezerburn, but at the Big Burn. And that photo found its way back to his family, and he has it hanging on the wall of his house.
Amazing,
now, right? Oh, it's so cool. But I had read about the consent culture that's supposed to be at Burning Man before my first burn. Yeah. And I went to the first burn with a photo project in mind, which I shot, and then also shooting life there, which I shot. And I can still see there was a young woman leading a string of young men like slaves to an auction, kind of, but with the Burning Man twist on it that we don't have to get into right now. But certainly very exposed to ridicule, or could be perceived that way. And so, I went over and said, "Oh my gosh, I'd love to shoot your photo. Can you do that?" And the answer was yes, of course. And then the second half of her sentence was, "And you're the first person that's asked permission today," right? And clearly, now they were fine. Publish it, share it, do whatever you want to with it, right? I didn't because I don't know if you've noticed, but the Burning Man Facebook group can be snarky sometimes.
Yeah, I'm never in there.
Right? And there are photos that I'll take that I won't expose to that, right? I just won't put them out there for that.
And may I say, by the way, that's part of the question that came up when I was having this talk at YOUtopia, which I didn't have an answer for. It was the first time that it was presented to me. The gentleman, Mike McDonald, who's basically being my interviewer on that, he expressed an angle of it that I'd never even thought about. In my head, asking consent of can I take this photo implies consent that it can be shared. And I did not make that connection until he said to me, he's I don't remember how old he is. I want to say late 50s. But what he expressed, he's like, I'm older than you. And he didn't have a problem with this, by the way. He just simply was expressing that in his head, he doesn't think, is this going to be shared? When he's saying, yes, you can take a photo,
right.
The next part of that, not there. But me, I think from my generation and anybody younger than me, I think the implication is, if I take this picture, is the next step, is it okay to post it?
That's interesting.
But those are two different questions, and they are not the same question to everybody, and I don't have an answer to that at all.
The exceptions to the can I take it and share it are so rare that I think I can remember. Maybe 4. I've only ever had maybe 4 exceptions to that.
That said, you can take it, but you can't share it?
And all the people I've asked consent from, I've had one person at Big Burn say no. I've had one person that any burn ever say no. Right. Everybody else is like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Right. I've had a yes, but will this be shared? Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I don't want to go put a top on, but if you do, can you do some blurring? Absolutely. Right. But again, I elected not to share that one in the end. Even after I blurred it out, it's like, you know what? They have it. The 4 people in the photo have it. That's enough, right? Yeah. I'm not sharing that one. I had total explicit consent that was okay to share it. That's one bar. But then based on a bad experience I had and a mistake I made once, I have next bar up. Am I totally comfortable with it? It's got to clear both bars, right?
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So, I made a mistake once and then not doing that again. Mm-hmm. But I have had people say, yes, I'd like you to take my picture. I'd like to have it, but never share. We have no footprint on the web. We want no footprint on the web. Mm. And to tell you the truth, I can still remember it. I don't think I would have ever made a mistake, but I shot the photo. When I got back, I edited and sent it to them and then deleted it so I would never make the accidental mistake of somehow going, that's a good shot. I think I'll put that on the Facebook group, right? So I don't even have it anymore, right?
What a beautiful gift. No, because that's really the fear that a lot of times folks have is when they are saying no to a photographer, it's because it feels like, and people don't know for sure. We're just all navigating our intuition, right? But they may be feeling on some level that the photographer that they are interacting with is more interested in a cool image that they can take credit for rather than truly connecting with their subject and feeling that they are having this shared co-creative experience.
Yeah. I try to watch myself, right? I don't want to ever catch myself making an image thinking this will get, 46 likes on Instagram, right? I don't ever want to fall into that trap. Hope I don't think I will. But since I know I'm human, I'm always, I always want that little catch. Hey, are you doing this for the right reasons in the back of my head, right? But
and that right there, my friend, is why you're the best person to be having this conversation with.
Right.
Because again, like in a lot of the mainstream and a lot of the world, people are having conversations like this, but they're more trying to figure out how to apply rules,
right,
so that they don't accidentally break them. But in my experience, if you can return. When I return to what's going on inside myself and what my intentions are, if I do the same thing. I find that when I have clarity of intentions and they're pure, things work themselves out. But then if I'm getting into an ego mode of I need attention for this image because it's mine. No, there's a co-creative experience with the person that was in it.
Yeah.
And they need to be honored just as much as any other part of this experience.
Yep. Yeah, so the mistake I made, I was just like, man, am I going to share this or not? But, given what we're after here. So I shot an image of, and I'm going to be vague, so maybe the image, anyway. So I shot an image of a person. It's a great shot. Creativity on the person in the image, right? I can't help but laugh when I think about it. And yet it's the worst mistake I ever made with a photo was sharing that to the Burning Man Facebook group. So here's the mistake happened in stages. It was near the end of the burn. I'd run out of cards. I shot a photo of somebody. Clearly, the individual knew they were being photographed, right? I thought I'd grabbed a card, here's how you reach me, and had the whole consent to share conversation. I didn't, right? Clear consent to have the image made. No way the camera was missed, right? But I didn't have I share these conversation, and person that the image was made of had no way to reach me, right? So, mistake on the ground, right? I do like I do. I publish photos to the Facebook group, and I remember the day I made the decision to publish that photo. It's like, man, I got some misgivings about this, but it's so creative and funny. And I published it even with that little niggling feeling in the pit of my stomach that maybe I shouldn't do this, and I did. And it hurt somebody, right? Which is still just devastating to me. But I thought about quitting. I was like, I'm just not going to shoot at the burn anymore because I do it for all the right reasons, and here I did this, right? But and I found out because this person's partner saw them. Hey, this is not cool. I'm like, yeah, this got consent. No, the hell you didn't. And I went back and checked. It's like, no, the hell I didn't. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. So what I ended up doing was friending both of them on Facebook. We communicated it through their, as far as I know, still off tonight. They're both okay with me, right? But they're friended. They see everything I post, and I made a commitment that this will never happen again. And so, one part of what goes on the back of my head to this day, and that was years ago, is there's these two folks that I committed to never, ever make that mistake. So that's where now I am. And so I was fortunate enough to be accepted to the doc team, the Burning Man photo doc team last year. So this will be my second year. So they have really clear guidelines about consent and getting real names and so forth before the burn, before the org will use photos, right? Which works just great for me, but not every photo that I shoot, they don't want them all. There's only so many they want, right?
Sure.
So not every photo that I shoot goes to the org, and they don't want them all, and so, things still get shared. But never again will I publish. I've shot photos since. I have been asked to shoot photos for people at the burn that I shot. They went through them and said, you're free to share these. And again, I've looked at them. It's like, nope, that's too private a moment. Nope, that's too special a moment. I am not putting it out there. I'm just not going to do it, right? So forevermore, there's always this two-tier bar, right? Yeah. Have I followed the rules? Have I followed my ethics? Am I listening to that little inner voice? Yeah. And so maybe I'm a little cautious on that, right? Maybe I'll share some that would work, but that's just the way it's going to be from here on.
I think everything you're describing and the story you told right now was such a spectacular example of really what I consider success in this process, because we are not going to be 100% perfect. We are human beings. We make mistakes. Life is mistakes on many levels, but the clarity of your intentions and the sincerity with which you navigated this experience and the openness and vulnerability with your willingness to share this with the world, all of that is examples of what we are all striving for to create these really, to create these better moments. We're not going to be perfect. We're not, but we set up these systems of ethics. You have your ethics, and then there's like the org's ethics, and then there's individuals. And the ideally, we are all overlapping as much as possible, so we can minimize the mistakes. And then when we have them, we recover fairly quickly and move on.
Yep.
And I think that is success. Success is not 100% perfection. It's exactly what you described.
Yeah, and so now to loop, oh my gosh, I didn't do that on purpose. To loop this back around, I swear I did not then mean to reference Kim Loop. I was not. Some part of my brain just did that.
Yeah, it's okay. It's good radio.
But Kim Loop is heads up the Freezerburn org here in Austin. I went to the first one, and that's how we met. That's how we got hooked up here, right? So Freezerburn has developed a very much stricter set of ethics and expectations around photography than the Big Burn has in fact involved too, right? Whether the the words may be the same, but Freezerburn expects them to be followed, right? People will get in your face. I hear, because I follow the rules, nobody needed to get in my face, but I hear people will get in your face there. But it's there shall be no part of a human being's body in a photo that you did not get explicit, clear consent from to share or to make. They prefer, don't make it, right?
Interesting.
That one, even as careful as I was there, occasionally somebody would step into a photo just as I pulled the trigger. Well, that one's gone to the garbage, right? It's out of here. But, Freezerburn doesn't want me assuming that because I got your knee and you're unidentifiable, maybe somebody knows your knee, right? Maybe somebody knows you well enough to recognize your knee. And to be very clear, I'm taking this seriously. I'm not mocking this at all.
Sure.
But that is the expectation, that no identifiable part of a human being will be in a photo that you don't have explicit, clear consent from, right?
So you can't do like crowd shots at
No,
Freezerburn?
there are shots. The 2 shots that I sent you where the main subjects had their back turned, everybody else is either pushed into the shadows so darkly that I don't think you can identify. I've got 2 good friends in one of those photos, and I'm here to tell you, I can lift the shadows editing and I still can't tell who they are, right? I wouldn't even pull the trigger on that. I wouldn't frame that photo up at Freezerburn because it violates the rules and ethics and expectations of the community. When we had the biggest burn that we had, wind shut down the big effigy burn this year, but when we had the biggest burn that we had, I wanted to shoot the back silhouetted shots, and I got permission from some people, but there were too many. I just couldn't. So I shot sparks in the sky, and I did other things, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. But the speech I gave there, after that the bad experience that I have, there's a speech I give that goes something like this. Hi, I'm Mike Whitten. Now I'm saying, and I'm shooting for the Burning Man org at Freezerburn. Hi, I'm Mike Whitten. I'm shooting for the Burning Man org and the Freezerburn org. And I want to make your image. I don't profit off these, but if I make it, I do want you to know that it can be shared on social media. I tend to do that just for fun and community engagement. And I'll give it to the Freezerburn org and the Burning Man org, and what they do with it after that is my control. Out of my control. You have to assume it could show up anywhere. Are you okay with me making this image? You. And like if you sit in the exit row of the airline, I need a yes. I don't want to see a head nod, right? Yes. And Freezerburn, even, there were a couple of big groups of people where I was getting yes, and I would get somebody, yes, like, hang on, you looked uncomfortable. I think that was peer pressure. What's going on?
Yeah.
And there were a couple times I'd gotten a quote, air quote, yes from everybody. It's like, I'm not taking this. I don't think you're comfortable. And I walked off. I'm done, right? So
I got to tell you, my thought on that is, in my career, in my experience, I typically find that those aren't very good photos anyway. Like the ones where I don't feel like I got very clear buy-in.
Good point, right? Yeah, because it's going to knock me out of the flow, right? It's like now that little inner voice that I ignored once and never again, now it's talking to me. It's saying I don't know, because I can't possibly then feel great. That's a good point. I walk off for following the rules reasons, but I hadn't even thought about that. Because you're right, I'm not going to get the energy in the photo that I want to get, because I'm not going to be the right mirror and the right amplifier and the right receiver, because I already believe it's wrong.
Yeah.
That's see, learn things, right?
Yeah, no, that's a major part of my stance. I feel like because there are a lot of folks, a lot of photographers out there who feel offended by the suggestion that they need to be more intentional about candids specifically, because they think that they're going to miss the thing. And in my experience, I have found it to be the opposite. And I have found that when I connect with my subject more, when I take a minute, to kind of connect on some level and have that exchange where they see me, we get a much more powerful image out of it than if I hide in the back of the room and have a zoom lens and snap this, like do this evil laugh as I capture it. I don't know. I have found that those images are much more powerful. And by the way, funny enough, side note, a lot of this stuff I learned out of the limitations of being a starving artist and not having the most insane lens. So I have no choice but to get out there and like get mixed up in the event. And then what I found over and over is that when I'm out there mixed into the event and truly connecting with people and feeling like I'm a part of this experience rather than hiding in the back of the room and stealing images like a sharpshooter, the images are just more powerful. They're more interesting. Than if I just throw money at the problem and hide, 20 yards away.
So, two things, right? One comment is when I first heard about the Freezerburn rules, it's like, holy crap, I can't. And then it's like, then the morning came and I'm full of energy. Like, this is just a creative challenge. Of course I can.
Yes.
And in 3 days I got them, 250 usable images or something, right? So of course I can do this, So I just needed to think about it at 9 a.m. instead of 9 p.m., right?
100%.
And absolutely no problem going out there. But one, so many people were willing to give enthusiastic consent, right? And two, the shots. It's like, okay, if I'm not taking this shot with people in the background or a crowd or whatever, I'm taking that shot instead. It worked out fine. It was not a problem.
Exactly. And this is where, for me, it goes to the spiritual side of things, right? And this is the part that I can't quite include in the publicly, someday when this is a public framework, like when I do a TED Talk on this, right? I need to find a way to convey this. And this is why these conversations are important. I do trust that a much more interesting image will come out of it. And it's because I'm trusting that the universe is navigating me in that direction. And I even do this with a lot of images. If I'm even working in a portrait, the light is landing on my subject a certain way. And there's a thing behind my subject's head that I know I could go delete in Photoshop, right?
Right.
But I would prefer to find a way to get that in the camera.
Sure.
And I am trusting that the image is going to be even more interesting if I do that in camera. And of course, you can go down the rabbit hole on this forever.
Sure.
But generally speaking, that's what I try to do. Right. And I think it's the same thing. Like you said, like you're like, I'm just going to go get this other shot because there's so much to photograph.
Yeah.
So much.
Yeah. And so, question. I'm going to ask you a question then, because I already know my answer to this question, but I want to hear your answer. Right? Are there ever? What do you do about a candid where you physically can't get to the person, or getting their attention would destroy their moment in the moment? Mm-hmm. Would you take the image and ask permission after and delete, or do you just categorically pass those by, or somewhere in the middle? I don't know. Don't mean to limit your answer.
I don't think I've ever done that. I don't think I've ever shot a photo and then went and asked afterwards. Okay. It just doesn't feel right to me. And I've heard countless stories of folks have very positive experiences and find that it's okay. Yeah. I personally have not done that, but part of it could also be, again, I'm 6'5". I'm a 6'5" brown guy. Like, right. I've learned very quickly that I can't hide.
You can't hide,
even if I try.
Sure.
And then I've personally, and again, some of this could just be in my head or whatever. I've personally felt that when the slightest implication exists that I'm not being acknowledged on some level, something about the energy feels off for me. And I don't feel strongly that this is the case. I think it's fine if there are situations where you do check in with the person and you delete. I've not had a problem with that. But personally, I can tell you this. I've done a lot of photography for government agencies and tourism and stuff. So I have shot a lot at like public parks and stuff like that, where there are people in the photo whose backs are turned or who are like bicycling through the image and this and
absolutely.
that. And those are in like very public settings. And even those, I try to like, I still try to minimize how clearly you see people, but generally there's a 6'5" guy standing there with a camera shooting in a direction. And when somebody's bicycling through in a public park, generally we're going to go with that.
Right.
A burn experience is a lot more intentional. And I think the power behind that is that burns are basically like psychedelics, we have these extreme experiences for a week. You know, you go to Burning Man, it is a week-long psychedelic. What we do there could not realistically be mapped out to the entire default world, but it gives us a more intense frame of reference, which we can utilize in order to do better in the default world. So that would be, you know, sorry if that was a long-winded answer, but
it's a great answer. It's
tourism stuff. Very often there are people in the photos, but those are default world. Somebody's like walking by with a beer. This happens a lot. People have beers. They like cheers the camera. You know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They're not walking around topless in a private setting. Like this is a public street, public park.
Sure. In
those situations, there is an implied level of consent that we're just going to go with.
Yep.
And these are usually tourism stuff for me, where like, you know, you're citizens, so everybody is a part of it.
Yep.
It would be different if it's like a commercial gig, where I'm shooting like inside of a restaurant, and they're going to use that photo to make money. Those 100% we need like clearances.
You hope it's all extras in that situation, right? Or
Pardon?
You hope it's all hired extras or something. In
Yeah.
that situation,
No, well,
right?
actually, funny enough, I have a friend I used to work with who found a photo of herself and her family dining at a restaurant that they used in their ad.
Whoa.
They had no idea this photo was taken.
That's not, one, illegal, two, not cool.
Right.
Right.
So, they happened to be fine with it. They thought it was funny. I can't imagine like who on multiple levels of this, the photographer, the marketing manager, the graphic design, nobody thought to check in on this.
That is so not cool.
That's different. Yeah. But a burn experience is a lot more, it goes deeper into this consent culture, and there's a reason for that. And it is so that we can work out these muscles and do better in default. But I don't think it maps directly though.
You know, I'm listening to my own response to that question about your friend. So one, I'm listening to my own internal response to the question about this person finding their photo. And it's interesting that I first went to, oh my God, they can sue for that, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, the commercialization actually changes the status under U.S. copyright laws. I'm sure you know, right?
I mean, talk about commodification.
Why didn't I go first to the ethics of that, right?
Yeah.
Of that's just wrong, you know, because I do believe that's just wrong.
They had no idea there was even a photographer in the restaurant. That's the thing. That's a trip.
So, because then, you know, I've got this thing going on in my head where I'm listening to the Freezerburn rules, and the Freezerburn rules are absolutely designed to prevent that kind of unintentional harm, right? And I was, you know, I've been told it's because some of the folks at Freezerburn have public jobs, and they absolutely can't afford burner style imagery to get loose, right?
Right. I can share with you, this is very important to clarify for listeners. So the reason a burn in Texas is an excellent psychedelic in order to explore this topic is that it was conveyed to me that it's still Texas. Like people do still get fired, right? I had a friend who recently relocated to LA, to Los Angeles. And Los Angeles is, of course, it's Hollywood. It's a photography and filmmaking capital of the world, right? So cameras and people Instagramming and influencing and all of that is just a normal part of the culture there. And this friend expressed to me that coming from the Texas burn experience, she is in a sensitive position, and she appreciated that at a Texas burn, she could really radically express herself and not be concerned about what happens outside of the safety of the burn container, and have total freedom to go through this experience and to learn and become but moving to LA, she said the LA burn community, there was cameras left and right, and everybody's snapping photos, and people are doing 360 videos. And because it's LA, they're so used to it, they don't even think twice about it. And I really appreciated her feedback on this, because my personal bias is that I would like for burns to still be that safety container, because I think that's where we get the powerful value out of it.
Yep.
But, you know, obviously we got to find like whatever a safe kind of framework is. I don't have the answer for that, but
So,
But,
to contribute my answer to the question about candids that I asked you earlier, so you can
Please.
chew this through the framework, right? Because I have, and oh Lord, who listens, I get raked over the coals for, saying the truth here sometime, but I absolutely have shot candids and then gone to ask permission after. And the ones that come to mind that I've done that for is almost all of them are silhouettes at sunrise and sunset where people come together and connect. And I've shot that and then gone, if somebody happens to be bicycling by in the past, in the background, right? One, I can't catch them. And two, it's like, it's like, okay, that's okay enough. They're far enough away, right? But the clear subject of the photo, I have managed to track them down and say, hey, I just did this. And I've done that. I've done it on vacation in some places, not burn related. I've done it a lot at burns, and I've had exactly one couple go, we have enough photos of us. Thanks, you can keep it, but we don't care.
Yeah.
Right. In every other case, it's been, oh my God, how do I get a copy of that? Right?
Yeah.
So
It's true.
So my personal experience with it so far is it has done no harm, and it has added joy to, I don't know, a couple dozen people's lives. Right.
Yeah.
So at least for me right now, that equation is returning nothing but positivity to the world, right?
Yeah. I might say, just even as you're describing that, what's coming up for me is that perhaps part of that is that at a regional burn, at a much smaller burn, I think maybe there's value in having different levels of intensity, shall we say, around this framework, because at Burning Man with 80,000 people, with 90,000 people, maybe part of the experience there is that it's a little more free-flowing and kind of a little less stringent. And if you do want that more closed experience, maybe the value is to go to a regional.
Somewhere else, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Because de facto, the big burn is more permissive.
Yeah.
Whether it's written or whether people want to say it out loud or not, de facto, I've talked to a freezer burner that who is very immersed in the freezer burn culture, that also goes to the big burn occasionally and sees a camera pointed their way and starts to speak up and go, it's a different culture here.
Yeah.
I'm the oddball now, right? Not that photographer is the oddball. And whether they're right or wrong, what they've internalized is the rules at the big burn are different than the regional burn.
Right.
And they have to adapt. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I think you and I both say it's what is currently.
Because you know what? If anything, I can tell you I've railed a lot on this podcast about people, I guess it's a common thing in general. Like, people will kind of like keep banging their heads about, I don't know, the presidential election, but they have zero involvement in their local, local community.
Sure.
So I kind of feel like a little bit of there, like, we can try to force things to happen at the big burn, but like, how about if you like that kind of thing, why not go support some more of the regional burns?
Yeah.
Because I'm railing a lot on this podcast about how I think regional burns are like really like, you should go have these experiences. Maybe it's okay that the LA burn culture is more photographically permissive because it's LA, right? And maybe if you want to have that experience, maybe there's some value in saying, hey, do you like that one? You should go check out the Texas burns because they're fucking amazing. Rather than like trying to like change the big burn into being that kind of thing. Maybe there's value. Again, don't have any answers. I'm just kind of exploring some of that here.
I will say for sure that the personal connections made per day were way higher at the regional than at the big burn. Not even. 100%. By my second day walking the loop, hey Mike, second day, right? Mm-hmm. You come on, man, you go to the big burn, you can walk your sector every day and not nobody, but very few people are going to realize you were there yesterday, right? So totally, it was, I'll be going back, right?
Yeah.
It felt like, I hate to say more authentic, because, Black Rock City, you can find what you want, you can make it what you want, right? Mm-hmm. There's plenty of authenticity there to be had. if you want to spend your day griping about Instagrammers doing yoga poses in front of art, you could find examples of that all day long if you so choose, right? Or go look for something else.
Yeah.
So
I so agree. I've always felt that burns are like law of attraction amplifiers, especially like, you want to go to Burning Man and like be irritated at the Instagram influencers. I've had this exact exchange with people.
Yep.
You can go do that.
Yep.
Or you could just totally ignore them and go have this completely different experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always willing to take a photo for somebody, right? And I've grabbed other people's phones or cameras and shot photos for them at the Big Burn. Once I got suckered into shooting a yoga pose for an Instagram. It just looked like, hey, I want a photo of this piece of art. Will you take it? And it's like, oh man, I've contributed.
I love it. Like I'm like,
but then radical inclusion, right?
Yeah,
it's like then go have a good interaction.
100%.
Right? So
Actually, you know what? You're right. Let's go back to. I feel like that could be the answer to the thing we were describing earlier. Radical inclusion. It doesn't just mean, hey, this person who's walked up to our group, but just in general in our community, if you are in the world of lots of, yoga poses in front of our projects, there is a world for you. There is a great burn for you. You could check out the LA one, for example, right?
Right.
You can, we had when I interviewed Athena Demos on this episode in the earlier days, she's like 20 something year, regional contact for LA. And what we talked about in that episode was that, for example, LA has what we call a phenomenon of fashion burners, which is like the burners who are really into the fashion art aspect of it. They come to the events in order to like show off the fashion and put on the fashion. And it's because that's a very LA thing, and that's okay. And I'm sorry, by the way, we're talking about LA a lot because it's like the extreme, it's like the extreme other side of the spectrum of like the Texas experience. But everywhere you go, that region's color sort of influences what their burn is. And there's something particularly beautiful and interesting about that.
That makes sense.
And then you go to Burning Man, the big burn. And like, that is like the international crash of all of these energies on top of each other.
Sure.
Like, let's just see what happens.
Sure.
Right. But the individual burns, the individual regionals are in a better situation to more like fine tune their individual culture because they're so much smaller.
Yeah.
And there's something amazing about that.
I think 1,000 attendees at this year's Freezerburn, right?
Yeah.
So, that's a block at Black Rock City.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just totally different feel. Totally awesome. Awesome in its own awesome in its own way. Totally awesome in its own way. I look forward. I'm already making plans. I'll be there. Back. I will absolutely be going back this year. So
beautiful.
But it's just different, right? It's just different.
Beautiful.
So,
Mike, thank you so much for this amazing conversation. I'm just absolutely. The whole time we're talking, I'm just like constantly a little just blown away at how much alignment I feel that I have with you energetically and thought wise. And this really was exactly the conversation that I was calling in from the universe that ended up happening. So I really appreciate this. I appreciate your vulnerability. I appreciate your openness and a sincere thank you on behalf of burners everywhere for giving your gifts to the community and being an amazing participant. And I'm so looking forward to exploring this topic with you again in a future episode.
Well, okay. Well, I'm glad, thanks to Kim for the introduction and, thanks for the ask. I've still, there's that little bit of, there's so many, like I said yesterday, I know photographers out there that have been contributing longer than I've been burning. So
shout them out. You said Mark Fromson,
Scott Landon.
Yeah.
Hats off. Hank Leiter. Do you know Hank? Have you followed his work at all?
No.
Jesus.
Check that out.
So prolific image creator, and hats off to Hank because he was the one that suggested I apply to the doc team,
nice.
right? Which has led to this. Hank, hey Mike, you should apply. You're good enough. Like, no, I'm not. He's like, yeah, trust me, you are. It's like, nah, whatever. I'll try.
You're beyond good enough.
But that led, I mean, they said yes. It's on them, right? That led to Freezerburn, which led to this conversation, which is awesome, right?
It's absolutely.
So Matthias Lowe out of Sweden. And I did say Mark. Did we say Mark Fromson already? Mark?
I said Mark. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Mark.
Oh,
I met Mark when he was in San Diego. He's in Canada. When he was in San Diego, we connected and hung out for a little bit. And then I feel like immediately after that, he just exploded. All of a sudden, his images were like everywhere, and we use his images on Burner Podcast website. I'm a photographer, but Mark is our official photographer because I don't really shoot at Burns unless I'm kind of called to duty and asked to.
Got it.
But my thing with Burning Man is I do this podcast.
Right. But Stuart and Dustin and Vab that make the whole thing happen.
Jamin and Percy, I'm looking forward.
Awesome. Right.
Yeah.
I felt a little just like, God Almighty, there's so many better members to talk to than me, but it's an interesting topic to explore, and it's one that matters. So I really enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely. No, and your work is amazing, and I really appreciate you for being on this episode, and looking forward to many, many more connections.
All right.
Thank you.
My skin began to turn red.
All right, well, it is Mike Whitten. We got all those links over on the show notes. What an amazing conversation. Please share this episode with 3 friends. You just text it to them. Or just post it on your social media or something. We don't advertise this show, so any of the followings that we have built is strictly on word of mouth from you, my dear listeners. So thank you. Literally, just text us to a friend, something like that. I don't know what you do. I don't know how you text. All of these links are over at burnerpodcast.com. You are always, of course, invited to pitch interview subjects in your neck of the woods. Pop over to burnerpodcast.com where you'll also find more podcasts, more shows that are not hosted by myself, and other cool Burner content. Burner Podcast has a revolving team of producers based in various parts of the United States, including Denver, Austin, and Los Angeles. Today's episode, of course, was produced by Kim Loop, my local Austin producer. Thank you so much. You are amazing. The Burner Podcast theme music, America's Horse with No Name remix, is produced by Joe Man, who just actually relocated from Denver to Austin as well. You can find his music over at soundcloud.com/DJ Joe Man. So until next time, love, light, and all that other crap. See you out on the playa.
burnerpodcast.com.